Alright everyone, it's time for a bit more of a funny video here about seasoning food, because people like their food in different ways, and there's the old trope about white people, they don't season they food. Wrong. Have you ever tasted Italian food? You realize who developed the concept of lasagna and shit like that? I'll point this out. Here's the preliminary. You should cook your food however you want. It does make sense to experiment, like some people do under-season their food. Some people over-season it, and it's almost like they're trying to make every dish taste the same, so they use like a huge slurry of different spices and herbs in basically everything they cook, and it's like, hey, I'm going to put some tikka masala and some cardamom and some curry powder into my milkshake. I think that'll taste good. By the way, putting herbs and spices in chocolate and milkshakes and stuff like that also has become sort of a meme. But then we live in an age where vegans and vegetarians will deliberately make their vegetarian meat substitute look like meat and feel like meat. And I'm like, can't you just get a fucking salad and sprinkle some blue cheese on it or something? Anyway, getting past that. The old trope about white people can't season their food, some people, there are even community notes on this, are claiming, well, that's because back in the old day, the use of dried herbs and spices was seen as something for the poor, for the underclass, often associated with outside cultural enclaves. So Chinese immigrants, Mexican immigrants, black people, former slaves and stuff like that. Whereas the erudite white Victorian people, they preferred fresh herbs and spices, and so they didn't season the food the same way. So if you don't know the proper balance of those fresh herbs and spices, or if the devolved culture from which you came that happens to be white is more lower class, it's not going to be particularly seasoned, because you've got a bigotry against the dried herbs, but you can't afford the fresh ones. I guess that's the fucking goddamn idea. I'd like to point out that there's actually a much more nuanced reason why there are some white enclaves that don't cook particularly well. Again, if you like your food to have a considerable amount of flavor, and I definitely fall under that umbrella. I was deprived of onions as a kid because my mom is convinced that she's allergic to them, so I tend to plop a shit ton more onion into anything that needs it than the average person might use. That being said, what you're really talking about when you talk about white enclaves that tend towards spice averseness, you're talking about Scandinavians and certain Northern European groups, and you're talking about the sort of middle-class Betty Crocker Americana food, hey, this is quick and easy, we're cutting a lot of corners to save time because you've got several kids, and your husband, who works hard and won't help in the kitchen, expects you to vacuum the floor and do the laundry before you come home. Buy Betty Crocker's new cookbook. No recipe takes more than 30 minutes. That definitely would be underspiced by any reasonable standards. Salt and pepper makes it better. I suppose it's the only thing you end up using in the end. I'm not a huge fan of that sort of food, although it does work for certain things. For instance, casseroles. Casseroles do not need to be loaded down with a bunch of herbs and spices, for example. I like food that's on the cheesy side. I really like Indian food, and that tends to be heavily spiced, and if I cook it, of course, it will be. And the other would be very low-class white individuals, like in basically giant food deserts in Appalachia and places like that. You're going to get a lot of horseradish, you're going to get hot sauce, and then the salt and pepper and stuff. A lot of the flavor is going to be added just by fat or excessive salt. There's a reason why the health rates are lower there too. It ain't just all about coal country, and that's the truth. There are also other groups around the world and certain foods that they make that are less seasoned. For instance, if you look at cooking in Africa, I can make authentic fried plantains African style, having been familiar with them being made by an actual Ghanaian immigrant back when I was in college. They do not require a huge amount of spice. Effectively, you slice the fucking plantain up and fry it in a shit ton of oil. That's it. You can add whatever you want to it, though. If anything, I see the white recipe adaptations by hipsters tend to make it more spicy. Like, you can make it curried, like I like to do. You roast it pretty well. You cook it pretty well, and you add curry, a bit more salt, whatever herbs and spices you want, and it's delicious. But you don't even technically need that. The fried plantain on its own is pretty yummy. You will note that lower class individuals around the world tend to spice their food less anyway. Which is odd because the claim is that it's actually an erudite sort of thing. Yes, if you go to a rich person's banquet, you may find a lot of the down-home comfort foods, and they're not particularly spiced. You will also find the same thing in a household that fucking can't afford a bunch of spices, nor the land to grow them on. I like to do both myself. You should see how many herbs and spices are in the drawer over there. I really, really need to get a spice rack, but I can't seem to find one. I really want an old wooden antique one. Can't seem to find one that operates properly because I don't really want to drill into these cement slab walls. I know I can. I know it's not against the rules, but, you know, then I have to remove it if we move, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Speaking as a white person from an originally lower class background, I season the shit out of my food. And I can definitely make fried chicken better than your mama did. Trust me, it's good. And it is very seasoned, don't worry, and extra crispy. Thank you, by the way, to everyone, probably 500-600 of you, that gave me tips and pointers on making fried chicken. The first batch was good, the second batch was spectacular. I'd choose my own fried chicken over KFC, although I would also choose to eat mulch over KFC, so maybe I'm not saying so much. Yeah, the idea that white people can't season their food, tell that to someone from Portugal. Tell that to an Italian. Tell that to somebody from southern France who makes pastries for a living. Now, they don't have any idea of that. Tell that to all of the, like the Cajun people down in the South. Tell it to all the cowboys out there that love their barbecues and their tailgate parties in the middle of Texas. Yeah, I'm sure that you'll get some interesting responses. I can also make tacos like a boss because, you know, I've actually interacted with people from literal Mexico. And no, it's not meant to be a health food. That's the other thing, the health conscious side of living. And this is not universally white. It's basically a broad selection of everyone. The more health conscious side of things tends to be less seasoned too. Either that or they just pump it full of seasonings to compensate for the fact that it has no flavor. Like, what does textured soy taste like? It tastes like clay, basically, like wet clay. Yeah, you're going to need to do quite a bit to it in order to make it palatable, although some people sprinkle it raw and shit, and it's like, it's not good for you, it's full of xenoestrogens, but yeah. The idea that white people can't cook is deeply disturbing when you look at where a significant proportion of the world's top cuisines actually come from. Yeah, pizza. Now, I'm sure that they'll be claiming that it was originated 5,000 years ago in Nubia or something like that, but it's not going to be historically correct. That's about all. Peace out.